Good day. My name is Eric Delory. I'm a senior consultant at Empirics. Today we're going to talk about end-to-end testing in call center environments. And by end-to-end testing in call centers, what I mean is the ability to generate calls into an enterprise, traverse a voice application, a voice self-service application like, please press 1 for English, please press 2 for Spanish, please enter in your account number, your PIN, etc. Please check, your account balance. And then the ability to zero out or opt out to speak to a customer service representative. At that point, the measurements in the IVR have been taken, the performance of the IVR has been taken, but at that point, we're then routed behind the scenes to intelligent routing platform and then routed to a customer service representative where hopefully, if CTI is working properly, a screen pop will occur. Proper end-to-end testing will also automate the logging in of agents, making available for phone calls, and then measuring the performance of that screen pop time relative to when the customer's call arrived at the agent desktop. So it's very important to control both sides of the call, the A side, which is the customers calling in, the B side, which is the agent's telephone, but also part C, which is the agent's desktop environment, their screen pop, their CTI toolbar, the attached data that shows up on their screen, and the actual software that enables a call center representative to be successful in their transaction and making the customer happy. It also allows the business group to track why people are calling in and speaking to account representatives, and it helps the business, manage their interactions with the customers. What Empirics does is we'll automate all three aspects of that. And today, what I'm going to talk about is the virtual agent desktop portion of that, particularly the thick client version. So we do both thin and thick client. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through all of those and what that means. So what is a virtual agent desktop, thick client versus thin client? I'm going to give you some examples and then I'm going to show you how it's done. Okay. So virtual agent desktop essentially is emulating a call center agent. It's any test automation procedure attempting to emulate that end user behavior with a computer workstation terminal. And I'll discuss both different varieties of that. And this is, typically in your SAP or Siebel environment, you can emulate, non-call center agents like your business users. But for the most part, what Empirics does is focus really on the call center agent experience versus the customer's experience. So the customer will measure the customer's experience from an IVR perspective, navigating through, and then we'll measure the customer's experience from a timely routing to the correct agent, and then we'll measure the call center agent's experience from call reception to screen pop delivery and the accuracy of that screen pop data. Well, thick client versus thin client. What are the differences? Well, thick client is a one-to-one ratio for workstation use per user. Now, this happens in environments where you're still using a Win32 application, or you're using a thick client non-web-based application. Some examples are Salesforce.com CTI integration, for example. There's still a CTI adapter client that gets installed on the workstation. So you need to emulate one workstation per agent. Whereas thin client, you have a one-to-many ratio. Typical test suites include Oracle Application Test Suite or HP Load Runner. They're used to, from a web-based, protocol perspective, they're able to emulate, hundreds of agents simultaneously on a single server. Whereas thick client, you really need individual workstations to emulate the true agent experience and what's going on there. Some examples. We've done thick client and thin client together simultaneously. Here's one example of a financial institution which had a pool of agents locally within their organization, and they also outsourced to a third-party offshoring team that had different software, different communication platforms. And this is how we were able to bring together an end-to-end test for that client, and at the same time test their third-party call center to make sure that they were experiencing proper screen pop time. So this was going to nail down all the service level agreements between the two parties and make sure that later on in production there was no finger pointing of whose performance, any performance errors or issues that we're having, whose it was it the network, etc., because they were going to actually run a production level call volume through this thing before they went live, and measure performance that way and get all the stakeholders involved and make sure that the performance was there, the configurations were there, and it also gave them a very an opportunity to work on a production day and troubleshoot and hands on deck and take a look at how all the systems move and breathe with production level call volumes without actually interfering with real customers, without them being real production calls. So it was a great opportunity for the two teams to come together and collaborate on how they were going to work and troubleshoot problems in a production environment. And Empirix was happy to kind of provide the call generation traffic and the automation efforts on the agent side as well, so the technology teams could work together. What we did is we generated 192 calls from the PSTN. 162 of those they went through the Genesis. They went through media gateway, so they were voice over IP with inside the infrastructure, inside the enterprise, and they went through the Genesis framework environment, and they terminated on Siebel desktops with inside the organization. So we had 162 thin client scripting. So we had one consultant doing 162 thin client agents. And myself, I was responsible for doing the thick client virtual agent desktop, so I scripted the thick client applications. So one of the reasons why they were doing thick client and the third party offshore is they had different software and they had to log in via Citrix. So the trouble there was, how do you get 30 or 40 agents to log in via Citrix and then log into the into the call center applications in a thin client test tool, and typically you can't do that. So we used a thick client tool here to log into Citrix, and then they had an older Avaya comm manager, so we were using the Win32 Avaya soft phone login for that, and that's what we scripted. So they can be used simultaneously with one another, and it offers a unique opportunity. So why did they use the thick client? Well, some customers, like I mentioned, have the Citrix web interface, or they have the old Avaya IP agent interface. So they need a thick client tool to sort of navigate these instances. Also, some people like Salesforce.com, when they integrate to a CTI platform, what they'll do is they'll put on the desktop, on the individual desktop, a CTI adapter. It's actually a Win32 application. It's a thick client application, and sometimes that crashes, right? So you're going to need a scripting environment that can work through those little 8 CTI connector pieces. So a thick client is more appropriate for testing Salesforce.com, even though Salesforce.com is a web service or a website. The issue is that when you combine it with CTI, it actually becomes a more of a thick client base using a .NET feature set. So thick client test automation tools are more apt when you're doing a CTI test in a Salesforce.com environment. It's fairly complex. It's probably one of the more complex things. So logistically, you need a one-to-one workstation to agent requirement. It's much easier in a VM environment. So if you have VMware, it's much easier to deploy 200 agent workstations off of a couple of ESX hosts, and then run the test from that perspective, or run the test from that environment. Because thick client does, sometimes it does object recognition, sometimes a thick client does image recognition, you're going to need to use remote desktop RDP to paint the console session of the workstation. The workstation essentially is black screen unless there's an RDP session established to it, and then the desktop is quote unquote painted, and that's when your image recognition software or your thick client software can navigate what's going on there. So Logistically, you actually need to set up one RDP session to each workstation. And also, just for the ability to start and stop these scripts, the knowledge of Windows tools like Xcopy and psexec is helpful. You typically use Xcopy to distribute the scripts or distribute the compiled executable out to the individual workstations. So you'll have typically a list of workstations that are going to participate, or a list of IP addresses that are going to participate in the test. And what you'll do is you'll just write a simple, Windows Xcopy or robocopy command to distribute the executables onto those individual workstations. And then what you'll do is you'll use psexec and another, Windows batch file to execute the compiled scripts, the executable scripts that you've built to launch on those individual workstations. And then once those individual scripts are launched, what they'll do is they'll open up the CRM interface or the web interface, and they'll log in to the CTI application, and they'll wait and make themselves available and ready for calls, and they're essentially going against the system under test at that point. The RDP manager, this is an example of just a visual example of the RDP manager, and its goal really is to maintain RDP sessions to these participant workstations. In this environment, what this image is basically showing you a VM host that is hosting 10 XP workstation virtual machines. So I've got 4 VM hosts, and each of them have 10 workstations on it. So this is 40 participant workstations inside this CTI end-to-end test. And what I'll do is I'll run one RDP manager to connect to all 40 sessions. Some people, they still like to use Windows terminal services. That gets kind of cluttered for me. I can only reliably fit 9 Windows terminal services windows on my desktop to kind of see what the scripts are doing. I like to use Royal TS for my RDP manager. I got a nice list of participant workstations on the left hand side, and I can kind of click through and scroll through it, and I get a bigger window where I can see what the script is doing on the participant workstation. And so typically that's how we execute a thick client end-to-end test. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example of a thick client script executing and finding an error. What you're going to see in this example is you're going to see a thick client test executing, and what's going to happen is that this agent is going to receive a call. They're going to click, the script is going to click the answer call button, and what you're going to see is it's going to take 2 seconds before the case number, actually 6 seconds into the call before the case number arrives in the soft phone. So this is the case number that the customer put inside the IVR. So please enter in your case number, and the customer touch tones what case number they're calling about. Then they opt out to an agent. The agent gets the call, and then 6 seconds later, they, different from the call, they get the case number. 7 seconds later, the screen refreshes, and then it takes 7 seconds for the screen to refresh. So 15 seconds into the call is disconnected and drops. So what I'm going to show you is that the call arrives 2:20 into the video here. So let me just kind of fast forward here. And what we're going to do is we're going to see the call, then the case number shows up with duration, and then you'll see the case number pops up later. There's the case number. It has the screen refresh. Screen is done refreshing 15 seconds into the call. There we go. And then it drops. The call gets dropped once the entire data arrives. And that was unexpected. So what happened is that 15 seconds into the call, the Avaya wasn't updated with the fact that the call was properly delivered and the CTI was delivered. So what the Avaya did was re-queue the call. The customer was unaware that under load conditions that they were getting, it was taking 6 seconds for this case number to show up inside the Salesforce.com CTI toolbar, and they were unaware that the screen refresh for all the case details was taking 7 seconds. So what they were getting is they were getting, screen pops, and then they were getting the case number within 6 seconds, and then the case information or the case details 15 seconds after the call, and they were unaware of that. And these are the types of testing under stress conditions and under load that we were able to show and demonstrate to the customer. So thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial on how Empirix does thick client testing.